You've been lied to about the Dark Ages. Roman surgeons performed cataract surgery with a 90% success rate, a number we didn't match again until 1970. 15 of their most advanced technologies weren't lost to time. They were systematically erased. And when you see what's on this list, you'll understand exactly why. Roman concrete doesn't just survive underwater, it actually gets stronger the longer it sits in seawater. Meanwhile, modern concrete crumbles within 50 years. We went backwards. The secret ingredient was volcanic ash from a specific town called Pozzuoli. When mixed with seawater, this ash triggers a chemical reaction that literally fills cracks on its own. Self-healing concrete, 2,000 years ago. And here's where it gets interesting. Emperor Augustus didn't want anyone else getting their hands on this formula, so he restricted it. Only state-controlled builders could know the exact recipe. Rival cities? Out of luck. This was basically classified technology. MIT engineers figured out why it works in 2017. Seawater creates these aluminum tobermorite crystals inside the concrete. They grow into the cracks and reinforce everything over time. The ocean wasn't destroying Roman structures, it was making them stronger. The Pantheon still has the largest unreinforced concrete dome on Earth. 1,900 years old, no steel rebar, nothing. Try building that today without metal support and watch it collapse before lunch. But here's the kicker. When Rome fell, the formula vanished for 1,500 years. Why? Because they never wrote it down for public use. The secrecy that protected it also killed it. We literally forgot how to make concrete that heals itself because one empire was too paranoid to share. And concrete wasn't the only thing Rome kept under lock and key. The Corvus was basically Rome's way of cheating at naval warfare. Here's the problem. Roman soldiers were absolute killing machines on land. But put them on a boat? Disaster. Most couldn't swim. They got seasick. And the Carthaginians had dominated the Mediterranean for centuries with superior ships and actual sailors. So Roman engineers did something brilliantly insane. They built a 36-foot rotating gangplank with a massive iron spike at the end. When a Roman ship got close enough, they dropped this thing onto the enemy deck. That spike punched through the wood and locked the ships together. Now, it wasn't a naval battle anymore. It was a street fight on floating platforms. The results were immediate and devastating. At the Battle of Mylae in 260 BC, Rome captured 50 Carthaginian ships in a single engagement, their first major sea battle ever, and they humiliated the Mediterranean's dominant navy. But here's where it gets interesting. The Corvus was so top-heavy that rough seas turned Roman fleets into floating coffins. Storms sank entire squadrons. Over 100,000 sailors drowned across several disasters. By 255 BC, Rome quietly retired the device after losing nearly 300 ships off Sicily. They banned their own genius invention because it kept killing them. Modern military historians actually love this story. It proves that sometimes the riskiest innovations deliver the biggest rewards. Speaking of risks, the next technology literally kept Romans warm while breaking their own laws. Here's the thing about ancient heating. We think we invented it. We didn't. Romans figured out central heating 2,000 years ago. And honestly, their version might have been better than what most of us have today. The Hypocaust system worked like this. A furnace burned wood outside the building. Hot air flowed through hollow spaces beneath raised marble floors. Then it traveled up through cavities hidden inside the walls. The entire room heated evenly from every direction. No cold spots, no radiators clunking at 3 in the morning, just consistent, comfortable warmth. But here's where it gets interesting. Not everyone could have one. Sumptuary laws, basically ancient luxury regulations, made it illegal for ordinary citizens to install hypocausts. Only the wealthy elite and public bathhouses qualified. If you were a regular Roman, tough luck, grab a blanket. The fuel costs alone were ridiculous. Heating a medium-sized villa burned through 200 pounds of wood daily. Slaves worked in rotating shifts, just keeping the furnaces fed. Public bathhouses maintained temperatures around 85 degrees Fahrenheit, even when it was freezing outside. And these weren't just in sunny Italy. Archaeologists found Hypocaust remains in Britain. Romans were heating homes in climates way harsher than Rome ever experienced. The kicker? that premium radiant floor heating contractors charge thousands for today? Same exact principle. We just gave it a fancier name and a bigger price tag. Speaking of things Romans restricted to the elite, lead pipes. The moment I mention Roman lead pipes, everyone thinks they know where this is going. Lead poisoning destroyed Rome. You've heard it a million times. But here's the thing. It's mostly wrong. Romans built an incredible water system using lead pipes called fistulae. These things carried fresh water through gravity-fed networks spanning hundreds of miles. No pumps needed, just clever engineering and a whole lot of lead. Now, the real kicker? Scientists recently discovered that mineral deposits formed inside these pipes within just a few months. This coating basically created a barrier between the lead and the water. Nature's own protective sleeve. Water commissioners ran this system like a tight ship. You wanted a pipe connection to your house? Better have the right paperwork. Unauthorized tapping meant heavy fines or straight-up exile. They took their plumbing seriously. Frontinus, Rome's water commissioner around 97 AD, kept meticulous records, 14 aqueducts, 300 million gallons daily. That's more water per person than many modern cities provide. Oh, and here's a fun fact. The word plumber comes from plumbum, Latin for lead. We literally named an entire profession after Roman pipe technology. The wildest part? Studies show Romans actually had lower lead exposure than many Americans in the 1800s. Your great-great-grandparents probably drank more lead than Julius Caesar did. Speaking of Caesar, he had some engineering secrets of his own. Bridges, specifically. Roman engineers could throw a bridge across the Rhine River in just 10 days. 10 days. We struggled to get a pothole fixed in that time. And here's what made it brilliant. Julius Caesar didn't just build bridges, he destroyed them immediately after crossing. Why? Because he didn't want anyone studying how they worked. The design itself was stupidly clever. Triangular wooden supports were angled against the current, so the harder the river pushed, the stronger the bridge became. The water literally worked for them instead of against them. Caesar's Rhine Bridge stretched about 1,400 feet, and it held cavalry, infantry, supply wagons. The whole Roman army marched across what was basically a temporary structure built in a week and a half. But the real secret wasn't the wood or the boats. It was the secrecy itself. Legion engineers were sworn to silence about construction methods. Even high-ranking officers couldn't access the plans unless they were part of the engineering corps. This wasn't just building. This was classified military technology. And the craziest part? Modern military bridging units still use the exact same modular pontoon concept. Same idea, just aluminum and hydraulics instead of timber and muscle. 2,000 years later, we're still copying Caesar's homework. Makes sense, right? When something works perfectly, why mess with it? But speaking of things that worked a little too well, wait until you hear what the Romans did with fish guts. So you think Roman concrete was weird? Wait until you hear about their ketchup. Garum was made by dumping fish guts, blood, and salt into stone vats, then letting it rot for months under the blazing Mediterranean sun. And the smell? Absolutely legendary. Cities actually passed laws banning garum factories from operating anywhere inside the walls. We're talking industrial-strength stink that could clear entire neighborhoods. My uncle's garage after a fishing trip has nothing on this stuff. But here's where it gets interesting. Romans were obsessed with garum. They put it on everything: meat, vegetables, desserts, even wine. The good stuff from Spanish coastal towns sold for outrageous prices, 500 sesterces per jar. That's 2 months' military salary for fermented fish juice. Why pay that much? Modern food scientists finally cracked it. Garum is absolutely loaded with glutamates, the same compounds in MSG and aged Parmesan that make food taste incredible. Romans accidentally discovered umami 2,000 years before Japanese scientists named it in 1908. The bacterial fermentation broke proteins into pure, savory deliciousness. It was basically ancient flavor concentrate. And get this, those Southeast Asian fish sauces everyone loves today, nearly identical process. Same bacteria, same result. The Romans weren't weird. They were ahead. Rich people paid premium prices for something science now confirms was culinary genius. Speaking of things the wealthy hoarded, public toilets had their own shared secret. All right, here's where things get a little gross, but stick with me. Romans used sea sponges on sticks to clean themselves after using the toilet. And these sponges shared by everyone. In public latrines where men sat side by side on marble benches discussing business deals and politics while doing their business. Yeah, multitasking taken way too far. But here's the thing. It wasn't as disgusting as it sounds. Fresh water constantly flowed through channels beneath the seats and past the sponge rinsing station. You dip, wipe, rinse, repeat. The running water meant bacteria had less chance to build up than you'd expect. Eventually, Romans figured out something was wrong, not through microscopes or germ theory, just observation. People got sick, the practice faded. And here's what's wild. After Rome fell, Europe basically forgot about public sanitation entirely. Medieval cities, people threw waste into streets. Chamber pots emptied out windows. London didn't have proper sewers until the 1850s. That's over 1,000 years of regression. Modern researchers actually argue that Roman public toilets, gross sponges and all, were more hygienic than anything Europe had for centuries afterward. Running water sanitation was genuinely ahead of its time. So next time someone brags about modern plumbing, remind them Romans had flowing public toilets while our ancestors were dumping buckets into gutters. Speaking of water systems, the next technology helped Rome dig deeper than anyone thought possible. So here's a technology that seems almost too simple to be important. The Archimedean screw. Just a spiral inside a tube. You turn it, water goes up. A child could understand it in 5 seconds. But Rome guarded this thing like it was nuclear launch codes. Why? Because this humble spinning device let miners dig deeper than anyone thought possible. We're talking shafts plunging 100 feet below the water table in Welsh gold mines. Without these screws, those tunnels would flood in hours. The gold stays buried. The silver stays hidden. And Rome's treasury stays empty. 8 bronze screws found in Spanish mines could move over 350 gallons per minute. That's enough to drain a swimming pool during your lunch break. Slaves worked these things in rotating shifts, cranking continuously while their replacements slept. The genius part? No valves, no complex parts. Any half-decent carpenter could build one that lasted decades, which is exactly why Roman authorities kept tight control over who got access. Can't have unauthorized mining operations funding rival powers, can you? Here's what gets me. This design is 2,200 years old, and I guarantee there's one working at your local wastewater treatment plant right now. Same concept, same physics, just shinier materials. Some technologies get improved into extinction. This one was already perfect. But moving water wasn't Rome's only obsession. They also perfected ways to launch things. The Romans didn't just build bridges and roads. They built weapons that would make modern military engineers jealous. The ballista and scorpion were torsion-powered artillery pieces, basically giant crossbows on steroids. These machines launched iron bolts or stone balls with enough force to pierce shields and armor at 400 yards. That's 4 football fields away. And you're dead before you hear the shot. Here's where it gets terrifying. At the Siege of Alesia, a single ballista bolt reportedly skewered 2 soldiers standing behind each other. 1 shot, 2 kills. Julius Caesar probably smiled when he heard that report. But you couldn't just buy one of these at your local Roman weapon shop. Private ownership? Absolutely forbidden. Only official legion armories could manufacture, store, or deploy these machines. The government kept a very tight grip on anything that could punch through a shield at quarter-mile range. Smart, honestly. Some scorpions achieved firing rates of 3 to 4 bolts per minute. That rate of fire wouldn't be matched until repeating firearms came along nearly 2,000 years later. My grandfather's hunting rifle doesn't cycle that fast. The secret sauce was twisted animal sinew. This power system generated energy equivalent to a modern compound bow, but at 3 times the range. No gunpowder, no electricity, just physics and really angry twisted tendons. But artillery wasn't Rome's only restricted technology. Their roads were equally controlled, and for reasons you might not expect. You want to build a road? Too bad. In ancient Rome, that was illegal. Roman roads weren't just paths. They were military technology, and the government controlled every single mile of them. Here's what made them different from everything that came before. Roman engineers dug down 5 feet. 5 feet. They laid foundation stones, then crushed rock, then gravel, and finally those famous fitted paving stones on top. The center was crowned higher than the edges. Drainage ditches ran along both sides. Sound familiar? That's because modern highways use the exact same design. We just forgot to mention where we stole it from. Now here's what gets interesting. Private citizens couldn't build these roads, period. Only government-authorized engineers had permission. Why? Because roads meant power. Whoever controlled the roads controlled troop movements, trade routes, and communication across the entire empire. And the numbers are absolutely bonkers. Over 55,000 miles of paved roads connected every corner of Roman territory. Legions could march 25 miles per day in full gear. That's like having an ancient Autobahn system spanning from London to Baghdad. But wait, sections of the Appian Way, built in 312 BC, are still walkable today. Meanwhile, my city repaves the same pothole every 6 months. Engineers estimate Roman road construction cost about $1 million per mile in today's money. Expensive? Sure, but those conquered territories picked up the tab. Speaking of heavy lifting, you want to lift a 100-ton stone block? Today, you call a crane company. In ancient Rome, you called a guy willing to walk inside a giant hamster wheel. The Polyspastos was basically a massive wooden tread wheel connected to 5 rotating drums and compound pulleys. One man walking inside that wheel could lift 6,000 pounds by himself. That's like deadlifting a pickup truck while taking a casual stroll. And here's where it gets even crazier. Roman engineers figured out how to multiply human effort by a factor of 60. One guy doing the work of 60. My gym should really look into this. But you couldn't just build one in your backyard. These cranes were strictly reserved for imperial construction projects, temples, aqueducts, the Colosseum. If the emperor wasn't involved, neither was the treadwheel. The Colosseum alone required positioning those massive stone blocks within fractions of an inch. We're talking precision that would make modern contractors nervous, achieved by slaves walking in circles inside wooden wheels. Want to know the humbling part? This lifting capacity wasn't exceeded until steam-powered cranes showed up in the 1800s. That's roughly 17 centuries of engineers saying, nope, can't beat the hamster wheel. Multiple tread wheels working together could coordinate lifts that seem impossible without hydraulics or electricity. Just wood, rope, physics, and a whole lot of walking. Speaking of impossible precision, wait until you hear about the surveying tool that mapped an entire empire. Here's the thing about birth control. We act like it's a modern invention. Nope. Romans had it figured out over 2,000 years ago. The secret? A fennel-like plant called Silphium that only grew in one specific region of Libya. Women used it as tea, applied it directly, or prepared it as a pessary, and apparently it worked shockingly well. How well? Roman women documented success rates that researchers today estimate came close to modern contraceptive methods. No hormones, no prescriptions, just a plant. So naturally, everyone wanted it. Imperial authorities weren't stupid. They slapped harvest quotas on Silphium tighter than a miser grips his wallet. At its peak, this plant sold for its weight in silver denarii. Silver, for what was essentially ancient Plan B. But here's where it gets tragic. Demand absolutely crushed supply. They tried growing Silphium in other regions. Failed, they tried farming it, failed again. By the 1st century AD, the plant was completely extinct. Gone forever because Romans loved it too much. One weird theory that stuck around, the plant's heart-shaped seed might be why we associate hearts with love and romance today. Nobody can prove it, but the timing lines up suspiciously well. Scientists are actually hunting through Libya right now, searching for surviving relatives of the plant. They want to figure out what chemical compounds made it so effective. Speaking of Roman science, their lighthouses used something equally clever. Roman lighthouses weren't just bonfires on cliffs. They were precision optical instruments that controlled who could safely enter a harbor at night. Here's how it worked. Engineers positioned massive polished bronze mirrors behind an elevated fire. These mirrors weren't flat. They were curved to concentrate and direct light outward across the water. The result? A beam visible from 30 miles away. Ships without that guidance were essentially blind after sunset. But here's where it gets interesting. Only imperial authorities could build and operate these lighthouses. Why? Because controlling the light meant controlling trade. If your port had a lighthouse, merchants could arrive safely at any hour. If it didn't, Good luck navigating rocky coastlines in the dark. The Tower of Hercules in Spain proves just how good this technology was. Built around 100 AD, it's still operational today. That's almost 2,000 years of guiding ships home. My car's headlights barely last 5 years. Running these things wasn't cheap, though. Lighthouse keepers burned through enormous quantities of wood, oil, and animal fat, keeping those fires blazing around the clock. Ships paid navigation taxes to fund operations, basically an ancient toll booth for eyesight. And the illumination they achieved? Roughly equivalent to an 8,000 candle power electric light. No electricity, no bulbs, just fire, bronze, and geometry. Speaking of controlling essential technology, surveyors had something even more powerful than light. Only licensed surveyors could touch this thing. The Groma was basically a cross-shaped wooden frame with plumb lines hanging from each arm. Simple, right? But in Roman hands, this humble device plotted roads so straight they'd make a laser jealous. Here's what made it special. Roman surveyors, called agrimensors, used the Groma to sight along those dangling weights, creating perfectly aligned reference points across miles of wilderness. Mountains, rivers, forests, didn't matter. They'd chain measurements together, point by point, until they'd map terrain with ridiculous accuracy. The 800-mile Via Appia, deviations of less than 1 degree across its entire length. That's like throwing a dart from New York and hitting a bullseye in Chicago. And here's where it gets interesting. These surveyors weren't just road builders. Their measurements had legal force. When a surveyor planted his Groma and declared property boundaries, that was it. Done. Arguing with an agrimensor's reading was like arguing with gravity. Pointless. The grid patterns they surveyed into European farmland, still visible in aerial photographs today. 2,000 years later, modern property lines follow boundaries, some Roman, with a wooden cross established before the fall of the empire. Makes you wonder what else we've forgotten how to do properly. Modern laser equipment achieves better precision, sure, but the geometric principles, identical to what those agrimensors figured out with wood and string. Speaking of Roman ingenuity with water and gravity, all right, we've saved the best engineering trick for last. Here's the problem. You're building an aqueduct. Everything's going smoothly until you hit a valley that's 500 feet deep. Building a bridge that tall? Impossible with ancient materials. Going around? That could add 50 miles to your route. The Roman solution was absolutely bonkers. They sealed water in lead pipes, ran it straight down one side of the valley, across the bottom, and back up the other side. Physics did the rest. See, water wants to find its own level. So if your entry point and exit point are at the same height, the water essentially pushes itself up the other side. No pumps needed, just gravity and some seriously strong pipes. But here's where it gets intense. At the bottom of a 500-foot drop, water pressure hit 200 pounds per square inch. The Romans built massive stone anchor blocks just to keep the pipes from exploding. The Gyr Aqueduct in Lyon used 9 separate siphon systems. 9! And it delivered 10,000 cubic meters of water daily across terrain that would make modern engineers nervous. The math behind this was closely guarded. If enemies understood where the pressure points were, they could sabotage an entire city's water supply. Modern water systems work on identical principles. We just got impatient and added pumps. The Romans, they let gravity handle everything. 2,000 years later, we're still copying their homework.